Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams. Today's video is going to be a look back at some older palettes and ask yourself the question, are these still any good? Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. If you're into eyeshadow palettes, Essence and Catrice, and getting the use out of your makeup the way that I am, then definitely stay tuned because I think this video may be right up your street. In today's video, I'm going to be taking 5 older palettes that some of them have been out for years, some of them are more recent finds, and to just look back at them like now that I'm trying them again, is this something I still want to keep in my collection? Is this something I still feel is really good quality? Would I still recommend these? So sort of like a look back. And because it was February and it's the month of Valentine's Day, I made a color selection of all of these different mauve tones. That was sort of my vibe this time round. I'm wearing one of the palettes on my eyes today, and I thought we could just chat about what these palettes have to offer and talk about that. And in case you're new here, it may be good to know that I have fair skin with a cool to neutral undertone, which greatly skews my makeup preferences. And because I've been buying, trying, and reviewing makeup for more than a decade, I also have some very strong favorites as well. So if you'd like to stay tuned and you want to join us for the ride, then please join the Snow Angel Club by clicking the subscribe button down below. So what palettes did I pick this month? Now, in case you want to know already before we do this video what palettes I will be playing with, you can always check out my Shop My Stash. I do that at the start of every month, and then I do show you which palettes will show up in this video. So if you want a sneak peek, then you just need to stay tuned for my next Shop My Stash, because that's when I will show you what I will be playing with in March. But for February, as I mentioned, I had this mauve rosy color scheme that I wanted to play with. I didn't get around to including the Huda Beauty Rose Quartz. I know some of you may be disappointed, but that was already featured in my Palettes Revisited Gem or Junk video in January. So I didn't feel too terrible, but it would have been nice to be able to group that in. But I was ill for a week throughout February, so it was a bit of a crunch trying to get this video up on time. So that's just something to bear in mind as well. But yeah, I included Dose of Colors Marvellous Mauves, Colourpop Making Mauves, but we'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a minute, the Sigma New Mod, the Melt She's in Parties, and the Natasha Denona Retro palette. So it's sort of like a nice little comparison of like a mauve rose toned color spectrum as well. Like, we can also talk a little bit about how I feel how these compare. I did one look with each one of these, and I will be inserting the pictures of those looks as we're talking about these palettes, and I will be linking you in the description box down below to any previous content that I already did with these. I will have either a dedicated blog post up with these or a video where I've shown you the swatches and all that already, so I'll make sure to link you to that. But let's just get started then with the Dose of Colors Marvellous Mauves. So one of the reasons why I wanted to do this video is that I'm sort of on the fence about whether I want to keep any of my Dose of Colors 5 pans. These are really amazing quality palettes, there is nothing wrong with them, but because they are all matte, they aren't necessarily my favorite, and I don't reach for them all that often. And Marvellous Mauves, of the ones I have, is my most used one. This is such a great basic eye look, and if you want really smooth, buttery mattes that have that sort of like powdery kick-up texture of the ABH, but that don't have the same sort of like weird formula where sometimes it doesn't blend, you need the Dose of Colors ones. These are not cheap. I believe these retail still for around the €40 mark for just 5 shades. They're quite expensive, but if you do like value quality over anything else and you just want really, really good eyeshadow, I think these are definitely not a miss. And from a quality standpoint, now that I've used it again, I'm like, yeah, this is really, really good eyeshadow. But this is why when it comes to eyeshadow palette reviews or makeup reviews in general, your preferences are just going to be so personal to you. I personally just really, really enjoy shimmer shades. That's just where I'm coming from, and I don't reach for this unless I feel like putting a glitter over top, which is not my daily go-to. Maybe for a party, but I definitely don't wear this on the daily for that reason. Does this have lovely shades though? Oh boy. This has some really lovely things. I especially like these two shades because they're on the cooler side of things. This one is a bit too warm toned for my liking. It's more of a rose rather than a mauve. And then we have this like darker, almost plum leaning shade, which I just tend to use as liner. But yeah, the way I tend to use this is usually this or this in the crease, blending it out with this, maybe popping this on the lower lash line, this as a bit of liner, and this in the inner corner. Like that's usually sort of the way it goes. So this is lovely, really good quality makeup, but I'm not sure whether I should keep this in my own personal makeup collection just because I don't reach for it all that often. But I think that if you really love your mattes and all you're doing is these like more basic everyday eye looks, I think you get a decent amount of product in here. Like each pan is 1.7 grams of product, which is more than a standard eyeshadow pan. So I can just see this being the go-to palette for someone who works in a corporate office where you can't wear a lot of makeup. This is going to be your palette. It's smooth, it's sophisticated, it will look great if you have mature lids. This palette has so much going for it, but it's not my personal favorite. Dare I say it. Moving on then to the Colourpop Making Mauves, and I already mentioned in the intro that I had something else to say about this. If you've been with me for a while, then you may know that I rearranged a lot of my Colourpop palettes over time. I have videos up with that as well, so make sure to link those down below if you want to see how I went about reorganizing some of my Colourpop palettes. And this is one of the reorganized ones, so I can't really tell you exactly what shades are in here because I would have to watch that video to be able to keep track of it. But yeah, I did a more cool toned leaning mauve tone palette, and then I did a warmish leading mauve tone palette, and that's this one. And this is lovely. I really enjoyed this when I was playing with it. So yeah, I put this shade all over the lid and it ended up being more of a taupey vibe, which is really pretty actually in the grander scheme of things. But now that I look at the whole color story, I'm like, it feels a bit out of place perhaps, but it ended up working quite well in the look, so I was happy with that. So yeah, this ended up looking really pretty, and these are the good Colourpop formula. Like these are some of the older Colourpop formula that's been around, and it's a really, really lovely thing that, you know, I just really, really enjoy. This is, in terms of like a perfect mauve tone color story, I think I actually managed to create it using this palette, so I ended up really loving it. I'm not sure anymore what other shades I used. I believe I used this matte in the crease. I'm sure I used that more cool tone purple that I've got in here as well. So yeah, it ended up being a really stunning look, and I really enjoyed playing with this one again. So this is definitely one that I don't see myself getting rid of, but as I already mentioned, I ended up making sure that I curated my own perfect color story, and that's just something that I really enjoy doing with my Colourpop shades and also with like some of my singles that I have. I really just like playing around with colors and seeing how things play together, and this was definitely a very successful reorganization for me. I hadn't played with this palette since putting it together that way. So it was good to go for me to go back to this to really be able to make up my mind, like, do I still love these shades? And these are all really good. Then what is on my eyes today? And that's the Sigma new Mod palette. So this is a more recent release compared to some of the other things. This came out in 2022, and I remember this being announced and me going like, yep, I need this in my life. And I ended up using this shade right here. I used this like purpley shade in the crease, and then I ended up using some of these like taupey shades here, and I just popped that in the inner corner. Because one thing I believe I didn't really do yet with this palette when I played with it for the review was seeing, like, blending some of the neutrals together with the plums. So I feel that this quad here is pretty neutral leaning, and then we go into more of a plummy vibe as we go along. We get one true warm tone here, so that's a shade that I would just ignore really. But this has some lovely shades. I really enjoyed this shade as well. I use that to blend things out. But it does have a bit of like warmer rosy things in the middle. And I feel that what really throws this palette off is that really shiny gold packaging. It just skews the way the shades look so terribly. I think that if you were to put this in like a white background, that you could see the saturation of the colors a lot better, but because of that gold high shine metallic, I feel you can't see how deep this actually goes because this shade is what's in the crease right here and it doesn't look that deep in the pan, but then I put it on my eyes and then I feel it's quite dark. So for me, this is quite a sultry, glam sort of rosy tone palette. It's not as neutral as the Colourpop, for instance, or the Dose of Colors. This, every single time I've used it, I come up with something that's quite glam, and I don't mind that. I like this. I would wear something like this to work just fine. No worries. So this is really, really lovely, and I really like the quality of this one as well. Now I feel it's a bit of a shame that I wasn't able to rope the Huda Beauty into the mix, because that would have been like the best, like more neutral toned option. And I feel that these final 3 palettes that I'm chatting to you about today are very much on the more glam side, I feel. So this is also quite dark. So I feel like a good, like rosy mauve tone palette that isn't too deep for fair skin is still definitely something that's a bit more harder to find. I think that the Huda Beauty Rose Quartz is perhaps the best bet of something that's still readily available, because of course the Colourpop one, this Colourpop one is 4 Colourpop palettes in one, so I don't recommend going out buying 4 Colourpop palettes, because then you might as well just buy the Huda. You know, but that will have some other shades as well, but it's not as rosy, I feel. It's more pinky leaning. So yeah, this has some stunning shades. I really like it, but for me, it just goes a little bit too deep to be wearing this every single day. Like the Colourpop is better for me for every day, but this is really nice. I love the quality of this. I'm so glad I gave Sigma another chance. And in terms of recent releases of a rosy tone palette, this was my favorite over the Patrick Ta last year. So, and that I still stand by that. And it's a really pretty palette. It's pretty awesome. You do get a good variety of shades in here as well. So yes, if you were to ask me, does this still hold up about a year later? I feel it's still a good one. Then perhaps the deepest thing I have to show you is the Melt Cheese and Party. So I loved my Melt Cheese and Party stack, which I used to own, but it was just a bit cumbersome. Like these shades that are stackable, like it was a cute idea, but I think that if they had gotten into the palette game quicker, that Melt would have grown and exploded a lot more earlier on. They didn't really until they got to the Gemini. Precisely for that reason. But yeah, this is the 4 shades from the stack. Now, I don't remember from the top of my head which shades they are, but I believe it was this one, and then of course She's in Parties, and then I think Last Caress, and like the Mean Streak one. But this shimmer, this matte, and this shimmer, I believe, are unique to this palette, and I really like that because these 2 lighter shades is what makes this palette work for me. The She's in Party stack was just a touch too dark for me. So I definitely feel it's more skewed to people with like medium to deep skin rather than fair skin, and I think that goes for a lot of Melt products, actually. Does that mean you can't make them work? Of course not. But the Melt formula, especially in some of these like deeper shades, it does go a little bit drier sometimes. So this, I feel that Melt is a great brand. I love their eyeshadow. They are one of my favorites, but it is a brand where you really need to learn how to work with the shadows, especially with like, this is one of the likable shimmer formulas, but Melt has some really flaky formulas in terms of shimmer that makes a lot of people not like them. My only gripe with Melt is really that they usually do a lot of mattes, which is why I appreciate this one, and we're getting 4 shimmers and 4 mattes, which I still love. The Color Story I still love as well. I think for the look, I know I use this in the crease because this is my go-to. I usually sort of try to rope in this shimmer. And then I think I went in with Sleepwalk, which I believe wasn't in the original She's in Parties palette. And I think I just layered a bit of this over that one, just to give it a bit more dimension, because this looks quite dark on my complexion. But yeah, the Melt She's in Parties is lovely, still one of my favorites. And I think that if you have that deeper complexion and you're looking for a good rosy tone palette, and you find most options on the market too ashy, too light, and they're not giving you enough, try this one, because I think this has the intensity that a lot of people need to make their eyeshadow pop. For me, it's a bit too much of a pop for every day perhaps, but it's pretty glam, and I think that will go for a lot of people with fair skin. But yeah, if you have a deeper undertone, then this may be a really, really good one. And then we have the Natasha Denona Retro palette. And this is lovely, still, till this day, lovely, lovely palette. I actually thought that this shade looked a little weird when I started using it again, but it was fine when I stuck a brush in. So it looks like it's got hard pan, but it doesn't have hard pan. I've never experienced that before. But yeah, I did end up using that shade as well. Now, the Retro palette was the one, for some reason, I liked it the least of all of the shadows I've been playing with this round, which is a surprise to me because I love the Natasha Denona formula, but I think it's just down to color story because now that I've played with it again, and usually when I try to do a full review of a palette for the first time, I make sure to try every single shade of the palette. And as you can see here, you have a couple of corners. You've got your warm tones here, you've got some taupey shades, and then you have your rosy plummy shades. So it's a nice 3-look palette that, you know, again you can mix and match as well. But now that I was playing with it again, I wanted to make sure I mixed a couple of those things. So I actually believe I used this in the outer V. I believe I used this in the crease. I ended up using this all over the lid. I used this as on the lower lash line. And then I believe I used this one in the inner corner and this the top over, or the other way round. And what I just noticed as I was playing with this is, you know what I'm missing? I'm missing something in this palette. And it's a shimmer, a rosy, plummy leaning shimmer. The only thing we get that is like rosy plum with a shimmer formula is this, and it's a really soft, almost satin leaning shade. It's just not that intense, which is why I feel you need these two to kind of make the palette a bit more versatile, which is why I love Natasha Denona. I love the versatility because we do get those topper shades that will work with a lot of things. But I was like, that's such a shame. Instead of this orangey shade, I would have liked there to be a more metallic sort of shimmer formula in here. Like something like this taupe shade. In addition to these two shimmers I really love in terms of shimmer level. But then, you know, take this out and give me something that goes with these colors in this kind of formula. Am I making sense? I don't know. That's just something I ran into as I was playing with this again. I'm missing a shade. So is that does this discredit the entire palette? No, but it's a reason why I feel justified. I plan my videos ahead, you guys. I work a 4-day job in education besides filming videos. So I cannot make content like that. So I need to plan things, else things would go horribly wrong. So a long-term video idea for this year, sometime in the next couple of months, after I declutter my makeup collection, I want to sit down and film a video where I rearrange some of my Natasha Denona eyeshadow palettes to create a more perfect for me Natasha Denona palette. And I have a couple of them, and I'm just going to pull all the shades out and see if I can rearrange these. I have pictures of the original, so I don't need to take into account that I never be able to put them back together again. And if I film it for YouTube, I will have the entire thinking process of where everything went as well. So it will be very easy to keep track of. But yeah, the retro is definitely one where I now feel I would have to bring something else in it. So, pull the warm tones out, maybe, take some of the pinks from the retro glam, or maybe some of the purpley shades from the lila. I'm not sure whether those will fit in here though. But yeah, I'm gonna have to figure those things out and see what works. But yeah, the Natasha Denona Retro was lovely. I really liked the look I did. But I just found that there's just, in this 15-pan color story, there's just something missing. And that's probably why I feel that this, together with the Huda Beauty Rose Quartz, are my, perfect pairing of a rosy tone palette. This for the, deeper, more sultry, plummy, rosy things, and then the Huda Beauty for the more neutrally pink-leaning things that are a bit more fair-toned and better for, every day, I've already mentioned. And then this is the cherry on top. That's the way I feel about these palettes. And I have mentioned in the past how much I used to love the Urban Decay Naked 3, and that's, I still stand by that. Urban Decay Naked 3 was one of the best cooler toned, rosy toned palettes on the market. And I feel that because we have been getting so much hype for warm tones in recent years, that so many brands have also skewed rosy tone palettes into this very warm direction, which, you know, definitely goes for these two puppies. So that's why I think the reason why of the 5, the Colourpop was my favorite. It was the cheapest one, and it's my favorite. Well, it wasn't cheap to have to buy 4 Colourpop palettes to put this together, but still, the Colourpop one, rearranged, making mauves. If I had to just pick one, I would keep that over the other 4. But that's not the way it's gonna play, right? I can't get rid of any of my Mauve palettes for sure. Natasha Denona, I love. The Sigma is just, it's one of the best palettes I tried last year, so that's also not gonna go anywhere. And I still feel they hold up, but especially the Natasha Denona needs some tweaking. So I hope that was a helpful video for you. Thank you so very much for watching today. Thumbs up the video if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more by me. Leave a comment down below as well. What is your reasoning behind these older palettes? Do you have any of these? Did you love them? Do you still love them? Maybe you use them every day. I would love to know. And then I hope to see you again with my next video, which will be up very, very soon. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.